Africa Update with Lulu Kapu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Israel has accused Iran of violating a ceasefire that came into effect earlier and has ordered more strikes on Iran. Now, Iran, however, says the accusation is false and the ceasefire was intended to end the 12-day war. And for more on this, we are joined on the line by a Middle East political commentator, Dr. Ori Goldberg. Dr. Goldberg, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you for having me.
Now, when the ceasefire was announced, there was already talks that it would not last. Was this the general feeling all round?
Let's begin by the fact I have no reason to assume what Iran is saying is wrong. 2 missiles were fired. They were fired from the general vicinity of Syria and Lebanon, a place where a lot of weapons can be fired easily by various elements. There's no reason to assume that had Iran chosen to break the ceasefire, it would have done so by firing 2 missiles on almost unpopulated areas in the Israeli north. I think before Israel actually manages to carry out the orders to make Tehran burn, Israel will check this very thoroughly, and there's a good chance, as is often the case with ceasefires, that the ceasefire will simply continue.
Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he says that they achieved their goals in destroying Iran's nuclear program. But is it really known if this is the case? Because the big question is, do we know what Iran has?
No, we don't. And we don't know what Iran has now either. The United States struck Iranian facilities. It used the infamous MOPs, the bunker-busting bombs, but we don't know what happened, and it is actually more likely to assume that the fissionable material was transported outside of these facilities, perhaps even in coordination with the United States, who had no wish to set off any kind of nuclear chain reaction. Broadly speaking, Prime Minister Netanyahu's statement doesn't appear to hold a lot of veracity on any account. Also remember that during this 12-day war, Israel constantly shifted and oscillated between various war goals, so it's not quite clear what Netanyahu says when he says all the goals were met. If anything, what was met was severe derailment of Iran's missile program, but even that, considering the serious damage taken by the Israeli heartland, even that is not a particular achievement to be proud of.
Now, Dr. Goldberg, the ceasefire was called after Iran hit the U.S. base in Qatar. And this is after the Iranians gave a warning to the Qataris that they were going to attack the U.S. base. And, the question then is this the only reason for the ceasefire? Because clearly, after that attack, not long after that, then there were calls for a ceasefire and agreements had to be put to the table. Or is it just a realization that actually, hang on, we don't really know what they do have? The fact that they have gone out and ensured that they don't want any people injured or any loss of life, but they will show their prowess in the sense that they are going to attack to send the message across.
Well, I actually think the quote-unquote attack on Qatar was a theater production mounted for the benefit of Israeli and American audiences more than anything else. It wasn't just a warning to the Qataris. It was coordinated with the Qataris, and it was coordinated with the Qataris. It was also coordinated with the United States. The ceasefire has apparently been in the making for several days at least now, and both Israel and Iran have a vested interest in a ceasefire. Iran is under constant bombing. Life in Iran is deteriorating quickly. There's no internet. Citizens are fleeing the large cities, most prominently Tehran. There's a need for the leadership of the Islamic Republic to restore stability to the country. In many ways, although not at the same levels, this is happening in Israel. Despite Israel's famed air defense systems, Iranian missiles have not only been managing to get through, but they've managed to cause some serious damage as well as numerous casualties in Israel proper. It's this morning we had 5 barrages, one after the other, which meant 5 situations in which we had to shelter in the space of minutes from each other. This was, as is par for the course, the last attempt before the ceasefire goes into effect. So I would assume there's real reason to believe the Iranians in this case. They didn't set out to break the ceasefire. Had they wanted to, this is not what they would have done.
Now, how likely is it now for the US and Iran to come to a nuclear agreement?
Oh, I think it's quite likely, even if the agreement will be of an interim nature. I think that was where US-Iranian talks were going. I think Israel has demonstrated that it cannot really effectively, significantly hinder such an agreement. Israel showed all of its cards. The Israeli strike on Iran had been meticulously planned for long months, if not more, before it took place. And now the Iranians and the Americans are quite aware of everything Israel can do. Israel can do a lot, but it can do a lot when it comes to the tactics and pyrotechnics. It can blow up things, it can assassinate senior leaders and nuclear scientists, but it has very little effect on any kind of strategic horizon for the region. The Americans and the Iranians were talking about strategy. Israel is not considered a responsible partner for a strategic dialogue. So I think both the Iranians and the Americans can now move on and potentially reach, at the very least, some kind of interim nuclear agreement.
Now, we've seen a lot of leaders basically, taking sides or almost taking sides or saying that Israel has every right to defend themselves against Iran, and also saying that the U.S. had every right to attack the bunkers of weaponry. How detrimental will this be for the Middle East and the world, especially with the fact that now world leaders have come out and stated how they really feel and showed their cards. For Iran and their supporters in terms of the Middle East, where we saw some countries stepping up to the table and saying, listen, if you need us, we're here. So now everyone has kind of put their cards on the table, and it's exposed a lot.
I think you make a very good point. I think the main detrimental effect will be for the world, because the leaders that you mentioned have shown that they don't really care about international law, because according to every reasonable assessment I know, including by Western intelligence organization, Israel was in breach of various and quite a few articles of the international law of warfare when it attacked Iran in unprovoked unilateral fashion. However, there is also opposition within these elite groups of the privileged global north, like the European Union. There are countries like Spain, like Ireland, that are pushing to look into sanctioning Israel with regard to its behavior. I don't think we've heard the last of this discussion within the European Union. Also, the United States. Look, it's true that the United States struck Iran's nuclear sites, but the United States did not do anything else. And even in those strikes, it did what Israel asked it to do, and it was a brilliant tactical operation. But it wasn't necessarily any more than that, particularly if Iran's stockpile remains operational. So while Israel may have appeared to have won the day, this is a very, very short-term victory, if it is a victory at all. These things are only beginning, and I think countries in the global south are now realizing that the global leadership, mostly concentrated in the global north, will be ready to flip on any of its partners should it feel directly challenged, as it did with Israel. I also believe that Israel has already become and will continue to grow as a political liability to leaders like the Prime Minister of the UK or the President of France, who have defended Israel's right to defend itself against Iranian aggression. And last but not least, it is important to remember that what all of these leaders said was that Iran should never be able to have a nuclear weapon. That is a very strict limitation, it's true, but it wasn't the main bone of contention, at least regarding what Israel said. Israel claimed Iran should not have the possibility to enrich uranium at all, not even in a civilian capacity. All of these world leaders did not refer to civilian enrichment. So I think what we're likely to see is an agreement that provides Iran with some capacity for civilian enrichment, even as it, in strict accordance with what the Iranians themselves said, obligates Iran not to develop a nuclear weapon, thereby bringing Iran back to some extent into the fold of quote unquote responsible nations. So, all in all, this is not a victory for Israel.
Well, Dr. Goldberg, thank you for your time on Africa Update. We'll leave it there for today.